does God exist? This is one of the biggest questions in mankind, right? And yes, I'm filming this in a barn. First of all, sorry if there's any echo. I'm in a barn. I'm filming this kind of on the go, but I really felt like this is something I was supposed to share. So I just wanted to talk about, does God exist? And if he does, how do we know? For me personally, how do I know that God exists? Those of you who've been watching my channel, you know that I'm a missionary. I've been a missionary forever. So why? Why do I continue to follow this God? Why do I continue to follow Jesus? There are millions of gods in the world. I, of all people, know that I just literally flew around the world in this past 6 months. I have been to so many different countries, seen all these different people groups, every major religion. I've been there. I've seen it. I've been in the temples. I've been in the churches. I've been at the mosques. I've been at all these places, seeing all these people and doing ministry, because that's what I do all around the world. So why? Why do I believe in Jesus? Why do I follow Jesus? And why do I believe that God exists? That's what we're here for. That's what we want to talk about. There are all kinds of different gods. What's the difference between the Christian God and other gods? That's what we want to know. In India, there are over 100 million gods, and people believe those gods with incredible devotion. So what is the difference? How do we know that God exists, first of all? So let's just dive straight into the question itself. Does God exist? The short answer, I can tell you, is the majority of the people on the planet would say yes. They do believe God exists. There is a minority of atheists in the world, even though they have a big voice and they like people to believe that atheism is the majority, but in reality, atheism is actually the vast minority of the population. Most of the world believes that God exists in some form or another. Specifically, I want to share with you about my belief in God, why I believe God exists. I do believe that God exists. I am a Christian missionary. I believe in Jesus. And I am also a person who I believe in reason. I believe in reality. I believe in actually looking at reality. What is life like? But my perspective of reality is based on what I believe God's perspective is. Because as humans, we have our perspective, but we're very limited in our perspective. We need to be looking at the perspective of God. What is his perspective? If God is real, how does he see the world? Now, that's a whole different topic, but I believe that it is valid to this topic, to what we're about to get into, because I'm going to share with you the reasons why I believe God exists. And I know that most other videos, most other people, they're going to go into the science of it, and they believe God exists because of the oldest tree in the world. It's on record is 6,000 years old, and all this other, the gravity of the moon and all this kind of stuff. I know all the science. I'm not a scientist, but I've studied it. I'm not just a blind. I know a lot of people believe that those who believe in God are like these blind believers. I want to make sure I'm right just as much as anybody else, so I study this stuff too. I have lots of conversations, and I believe in finding truth, not just blindly, but really seeing the evidence of that truth. Now, I said I'm not going to go through the science of it. The reason why is not because I don't know the science of it, but because there are other videos made by people who are way better at that kind of stuff than I am, who can share, and feel free to go and look at some other videos about the science behind why we know that God is true, just the physical evidence. Like if you haven't read it, there's a Bible called the Evidence Bible. I really recommend you get it. That's by Ray Comfort. Awesome Bible. I've studied it a lot myself. You can get a lot of great stuff there. And there's also lots of other just YouTube videos and other resources. I want to share my personal reasons for why I believe in God, because I believe it's relevant, because I don't believe that this is something that is talked about as much as it should, especially on this platform and this category of videos of whether or not God exists. So I want to share with you, me as a missionary, I have served God as a missionary for 17 years. Since I was 16 years old, I left home, I became a missionary, and I have been serving him ever since. And that isn't just because I thought, hey, that'd be sweet, we should go be a missionary and travel around and spend a bazillion hours sitting on airplanes and eating all kinds of different foods and getting sick and all this kind of stuff that happens when you're a missionary. That wasn't what I decided. All right? I decided to be a missionary because of some things that I have seen God do in my life. Not just theory. That's not what I'm here to share with you. I'm not going to talk to you about my opinion or my theory or what I think. I'm going to share with you my experience, because a lot of people have theories on God. They have a lot of theories on what God does and why God does what he does and why God exists, based on knowledge, based on things that they have studied out. And like I said, I do study, but I do not base my belief on God just because of some book that I read, because books can be really well written. So you can't base it on just what you have read in a book. I don't believe in just looking at theory. I want something to be tested. If God is real, I want to see it. I want to see him move. I want to see, if God is all powerful like he says, I want to see that power. Okay, I want to hear his voice. I don't want to just have someone else tell me how great he is, or be in a church service where everyone's singing him because 500 people say he's great. All of a sudden I believe. That's not how I am as a person. I am the first one to be like, I want to see the proof. So let's just get into it. Why do I believe in God? Why do I believe that God exists? I could tell lots of stories, but I want to start with probably the most dramatic story that I have seen as a missionary. And that was about 8 years ago, whenever I was in Guatemala. My wife was going through her missionary training with Youth with a Mission. And we went to Guatemala as part of that training for 2 months. And while we were there, we had some incredible experiences. But the one that really affected me the most was, there was one particular day whenever we were going to this hospital, because there are lots of abandoned children in Guatemala. And we were going to give food and clothing to several babies who had been abandoned there in the hospital. So we went there with the team. And as we were there, the team was too big. Like the room that the babies were in was a very small room. And our team, it wasn't a large team, but there were just too many people for us all to be in the room. So I wasn't one of the students. I was one of the staff. So I actually decided not to go in the room and just take up more space. So I decided I was just going to go walk around the hospital. Now, this was whenever I personally, in my ministry, was just starting to understand how God worked. Like, I had been a missionary for years already, but experience, in my opinion, teaches you so much more than a classroom setting. That's why in my ministry, we don't have schools. You know, we're working on some shorter training, but we don't have big schools or anything like that, because I believe experience is the greatest teacher of all. I was in this hospital, right? And so I start walking around. And as I was walking down one of the main hallways, I felt like God spoke to me. Now, if you want to know how to hear God's voice, that'll be a different topic. I'll do that in another video later on. But I heard God speak to me. And I saw this guy in a wheelchair, and God told me, I want you to put your hands around his feet, and I want you to pray for him. So I went, and I didn't want to put my hands on his feet because his feet were nasty looking to me. And so what I did was I didn't obey. You know, I know I'm a missionary, but sometimes most of the time I'm not perfect at all. And so I put my hand on his head and I prayed for him, and nothing happened. Okay? Nothing happened. Didn't feel anything. He just sat there. I felt really guilty. I walked away. So I walked down the hall. I ended up in the waiting room, the front room of the hospital. And I was feeling really guilty and, all this kind of stuff. And so as I was there, I see another guy in a wheelchair, and I felt like God told me to do the same thing. He said, I want you to go. I want you to pray for this guy. I want you to put your hands around his legs. So I went up to him, and he had a doctor there who was taking his temperature. I asked the doctor what was going on. He said the guy had a really high fever. So I asked the guy if I could pray for him. Now, he had been in this wheelchair for about 7 years. He had fallen off a ladder, broken his back, the whole deal. So his legs were really tiny. They were like little tiny legs. So I got down. I said, can I pray for you? And he said, sure. Usually people say yes. So I got down. I put my hands around his little tiny legs. Put my hands around his little tiny legs, and I started to pray for him. And I didn't know what to say. Okay, I know that you're supposed to be super spiritual and be like, oh, Father above, and have something glorious to say. I didn't know what to say, because I was already feeling guilty from the last guy. And I was like, I failed with the last guy. Nothing's probably going to happen here. And I was still really new to all of this. So I get there, and I got my hands around him. And all I said was, in Jesus' name. That was it, because the name, man, let me tell you, the name of Jesus is so awesome, so powerful. I said, in the name of Jesus, or in Jesus' name. And whenever I said that, I felt this electricity go through my hands and go into that guy's legs. And his little tiny little muscles started squirming around. They started like flexing in my hands. And the guy's like, he starts making that noise. And I freaked out. And I was like, whoa, what happened? And he said, I don't know. I can feel something in my legs. And as he was saying that, the doctor's eyes got real big, because he was taking the temperature. And as he was taking the temperature of the guy who had that high fever, the temperature was going down on the thermometer. So the doctor starts freaking out. The guy's freaking out. I'm freaking out. We're all like, what in the world is happening? So the doctor grabs the guy, the wheelchair the guy's in, and just wheels him off. And so I'm standing there like, what was that? And I was so shocked, because I had seen a few miracles, but that was the first one that happened like The big one that happened through me. There had been a few smaller things, but that was like a big one. But he wheeled the guy off, so I didn't even really know what happened. So he ran off, and I was like, well, that was crazy. Now I'm going to get in trouble because I was touching the patient. It was scary, guys. So I was there in the waiting room for a while, not really sure what to do. I didn't know what was I supposed to do. I'm just standing there. So then, as I'm standing there, the next thing I know, this was about maybe 10, 15 minutes later, I was just standing in the waiting room thinking, should I pray for somebody else? Should I do something else? The doctor who wheeled off the wheelchair guy comes running back in. He comes and he says, you need to come with me. And the pastor who was with me during this whole thing, the Guatemalan pastor, was like, all right, well, let's go with him. So we went with the doctor. The doctor took me down to the end of this hallway. Like, he took us into the back, like the restricted area where all the hospital rooms are, where, unless you're a visitor or a family member, you're not supposed to be able to go. So he takes us back there, takes us all the way to the end of the hall, and he points at me. He opens up the door in the room. He says, go do what you just did. And I'm standing there, thinking, I don't even know what I did. I just put my hands on the guy and just prayed for him. And that was it. I didn't even know what to say. So I looked at the pastor, and the pastor just said, go on in. Told me to go in. So I walk into the room, and it was one of the most terrifying, horrible situations I've seen. Because it was like a woman's room, but like a critical care kind of hospital room. There were all these women in beds, and they're all like in these big nighties. And like one lady, she had like a leg, just like hanging from a strap. She'd been shot like 3 times. And then there were all these other ladies in there, and their hair's all, like that. And it was uncomfortable for everyone. So I'm there, and I have my little Bible with me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I'd never been in this kind of situation before. And so I got in there, and the only thing I could think of was like the most cliche Bible verse that any of us know, John 3:16, right? So I opened up the little verse, and I said, for God so loved the world. Whenever I read that verse, the Spirit of God came into that place. And I'm telling you, it was like an atomic explosion in that hospital room. The presence of God just started hitting people. And all these women were like, gee, they're calling out to Jesus. One lady was like grabbing my clothes, trying to pull me over. Tell us about Jesus. Tell us more. It was the most crazy, surreal experience I have ever been through. Or I had been through up to that point. And so all these people, they're getting touched by God, and all the crazy stuff is happening. And the doctor comes in, makes sure everybody's okay, pulls me out and takes me to the next room. And he took me through every single room in that hospital with that pastor. And I'm telling you, I watched with my own eyeballs women who had tumors and stuff just shrinking down as we were praying for them. It was incredible, guys. I mean, for me, I saw it happen with my own eyes. People just getting healed, all this incredible stuff, room to room, in every single room, all these people were getting healed. It was it was just awesome. After that, when we were there, we had about a month more in Guatemala after that. We were preaching in churches every single day. There were so many churches wanting us to go preach because of all the miracles that happened. I mean, during that month, it was just like this outbreak of miracles around us. We had people with cancer getting healed, people with AIDS getting healed, we had one blind guy getting healed, which I'd never seen a blind person get healed before. A guy, blind guy getting healed, and there was a guy in the hospital vomiting blood at the last stage of a cancer, and they were like, there's no way anything's going to happen. We prayed for the guy, and he got healed instantly, was back home, normal in 2 weeks. It was incredible, the incredible rate of recovery that this guy had. So that time in Guatemala completely changed me. And it was one of the reasons why I believe in God so strongly. But it was not just one isolated incident, because whenever you go through a miraculous incident like that, the one thing always happens. You go through it, you see it, and you immediately begin to doubt it. You immediately start, that's just the way it works. The enemy, your flesh, everything starts to make you wonder, well, what about this, and what about this, and what about this? So if it had just been one isolated incident, this might be a different story. But a couple of years later, and I have to say, there are dozens of stories like this, so I'm just skipping to some of the more dramatic ones that have happened over the years. There's been a lot that has solidified my belief in God and why I believe God exists. I want to share with you another story. Whenever for those of you who know me, I've been living in Panama for the past 12 years. I'm in Texas right now. We're about to start a speaking tour here. But my home is in Panama. That's where my kids were born. That's where my wife is from. So Panama is really more my home than anything else. When I was in Panama, we had a team come down that was going to do ministry with us. And while they were doing ministry with us, we were invited to go to lead a children's program in this one town near where we live. So we go, this pastor is really excited to have us. He's a good friend of mine. We go do this children's program. He tells us, go house to house, go invite people. So we go and we invite all these kids. He says, you know what, there's going to be about 40 kids who are going to come to this program, and it's going to be really awesome. You guys can do dramas, you can play games with them, you can do all this stuff with them. So we go, we invite all of these people. We go door to door, invite all these kids. We're really excited. As we get near the program, instead of having 40 kids show up, we had 80 kids come, and they brought like their parents and grandparents. So we ended up with like 100 kids, 100 plus people who were there. So we were like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. We were so excited that God had doubled the amount of people. So we did the whole program. We're all excited. Woohoo, this is great. And then the pastor comes near the end of the program, and he's flustered. He's not angry. He's not like frustrated, but he was nervous. He was a little bit upset. And he's like, Alan, we have a big problem here. I don't know what to do. I said, Pastor, what could possibly be the problem? We have double the people we were expecting. This is amazing. And he said, yes, but the reason I told you we were expecting 40 people was because the same 40 kids always come to this group. And I had told them that if they came, we would give them a sandwich, a bag of chips, and they sell juice in these bags. He says, we're gonna give them a bag of juice. And so this is why, another reason why I believe in God, because the Word of God, the Bible, really speaks. Like, it is a living thing. It is amazing. If you really study it, if you really look at it and really ask God, say, God, speak to me through your Word, and you start reading His Word, He will speak to you. I had just read that morning about Jesus when He multiplied the bread and the fish, which is one of the stories in the New Testament where they're all, 5,000 people came, they didn't have enough food, and so Jesus prayed and all this stuff, this incredible miracle of food multiplication happened. I had just read that morning, and I told the pastor, I was like, what if God still could do something like that? So, what's the worst that could happen? We already don't have enough food. So the worst that could happen is we don't have enough food to give out. But what if we just see? Let's see if God will answer us or not. Let's see if God exists, if God is real, if God really is powerful. Let's just see it. So we took the food, and we took the chips and the juice and the bread, and we prayed over it, and we asked God to help us out. We put everyone in lines. Just to give you the picture, the pastor had one of those little trays, like the metal trays that had the 40 sandwiches in it. My wife it was like a garbage bag full of the 40 bags of chips, like the little personal personal chip size. And I had like a 10-gallon bucket that was full of all the juices. So we put people in line. 10 people, 20 people, 40 people, 60 people, 80 people, 100 people went by. Everybody got a juice. Everybody got a sandwich. Everybody got a bag of chips off of 40. 100 people off of 40. So that in itself is exciting. That's like, woo, But there's way more to it than that. Because not only did everyone get something, but the tray of bread was still completely full of sandwiches. My wife with the bag of chips, the chips were all still there. And I had the least faith of anyone. And I only had one juice left, which I drank because I was super thirsty. So this whole thing happened, right? And then, so the pastor comes back to me, and we're all in shock. We're like, oh my gosh, God is amazing. He's real. He really is real. What do we do now? We have all these sandwiches. And so we decided we were going to give out a second time. So we give everyone seconds except for the juice because I drank all the last juice. So we go out, we give seconds to everybody. After we give seconds to everybody, the tray of sandwiches was still full, the juice was gone, and the chips were still completely full. It was one of the most amazing things I have ever seen. And the pastor came to me and he said, Alan, what do we do? How do we make this stop? This is incredible, but now we have way too many sandwiches. Nobody wants anymore. We have way too many juices or chips. We prayed about it, and what we decided was that because it was Saturday when this happened, that we would wait until Sunday morning and the pastor would give this stuff out in the church. The next morning, the pastor gave out the chips, gave out the sandwiches, and after he gave out to the whole group of people in the church, it all ran out. And God has done miracles. When I've been with this pastor, almost every single time I've been with him, we've seen miracles like this. That said, these are the main reasons. Now, I actually have here in my notes, I have a whole list of miracles I was going to share, but this video will go way too long if I keep going through these miracles. There's just too many. I could tell this whole story of this one man I met. He was in the woods. He was dying. He was living in a hut in the woods in Panama. He was dying. He had AIDS. We prayed for him. God made those AIDS vanish. It was incredible. My wife, she had a tumor in her pituitary gland, almost knocked us off the ministry for a while. God made it vanish instantly, well over 2 days. It was just incredible. We even have the MRI and X-ray to prove it. It's just absolutely incredible how God does it. So I could keep going. I mean, I've been a missionary for 17 years, and I have seen God over and over and over again do the most incredible miracles. That hospital story in Guatemala, it has happened in Panama. We saw a whole half of a wing of a children's hospital get completely healed in one of the most dramatic miracles I've ever seen. And we travel all over the world, and we're seeing miracles. Constantly we're seeing miracles because God is so good. What we come down to now, we come to this question. If God exists, now I know personally, and you may be watching this because you're wondering, how can you know? I mean, it's great that I have stories. It's great that I've seen miracles, but how can you know? Let me start off by saying this. God is a living God, all right? It isn't a statue like in Hinduism. It isn't he isn't just some floaty force that we hope exists. God is real, and he really does love you, and he really does want a relationship with you. So if you want to know if God exists, I would challenge you, go, sit down. If you are sincere about wanting to know God, go to him in sincerity and say, God, are you real? Do you really exist? If so, please show me. And if you wait for a while, you're going to start to feel something. You're going to feel his presence. You may even be feeling his presence as you watch this video. That change, that shift in the air, that shift in the atmosphere whenever God walks into a room, because he does. He is active, and he is active in the lives of all of us and his people. And he walks into that room, and that whole shift in atmosphere whenever things can start to really happen, when miracles can really start to happen. Now, if you're wanting to know, just ask God. Say, God, I want to know. Get a Bible if you don't have a Bible. If you have a smartphone, you can get Bibles for free. eSword, you can get tons of different stuff for free. And just start really asking God. And I'm here as well. I mean, feel free in the comments to write me. I will be more than happy to answer questions as best I can. I love talking to people, getting to know people. But you can know for sure. You can know if God exists. And it isn't because I'm special. I promise you. If you've seen some of my other videos, how goofy, how ridiculous some of my videos are, you know I'm not special. I'm just a normal, regular dude. I just happen to be a missionary, and because of that, God interacts with me. I love Jesus. I have an actual relationship with him. It isn't a religious relationship where, it's all dependent on me doing things and me, fulfilling some kind of obligation. It's about a friendship between me and God, and because of that friendship, God works on my behalf, and he will work on anyone's behalf. I promise you, if he will do it for me, he will work on anyone's behalf. And so I challenge you to do that. If you like this video, please like it, hit the subscribe button below, hit the notification button. It should be the little bell by the subscribe button. Ask me any questions you want. I'm here. I would love to answer. I'll make video responses if it's something cool that I could talk about on video. Otherwise, I'll write you personally. Thank you so much. Be blessed. God does exist. Please believe that. And stay tuned. Thank you so much.